That's not on. But you know what? It's fun. It's good to laugh. Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Who's a fan of Brooklyn Nine-Nine? It's good laugh, that show. All right. Well, we're talking about extra today. Extra money. Just put your hand up, double hands. If you have extra money, heaps of money to spare, just let me know. Not even I saw a hand down the back. There was a couple of people that sort of went like this in the first. You know what? My job today is actually to convince you that you have extra money. So strap yourselves in for that you have extra money. And truthfully, what you do with your money is an indication of the state of your heart. What you do with this extra money you have, Jesus would tell you, is an indication of the state of your heart, where you have your idols, what you think is important in life. And Jesus, man, he goes hard at this, and he's going to speak to us today about it. Because here's the trouble with extra. Here's what we tend to do with extra. We think, well, extra comes in, I spend it and I consume it on myself, on the things that I need, blah, blah, blah. We spend it, and so it's not extra, right? Because I've spent it. Or, and this is the category that might surprise some, we go, I'll save it. I'm going to save my extra for the future. I'm going to invest into my future self, my future family, or whatever it might be. So I've dealt with my extra, and Carl, at the end of the day, I don't have extra. We're going to talk about that, and you'll see that God actually goes hard at this topic. So let's talk about extra and who has extra here. Now, Pastor John last week did a great game in the message, and it was exceptional. And I just feel I have to beat Pastor John at his own, right? Okay, let's be honest. There's no sense of competition here, but I'm going to have a shot. So my game is called Sit Down If. I promise you, nobody will be embarrassed, all right? But would you be also kind to stand with me? That would be lovely if you could do that. Everybody stand. So it is a choice, but no one's embarrassed. It's going to be very easy. So you have to sit down if any of these things have happened to you. Sort of recently, let's go last 2 weeks, or we'll kick off with that. So sit down if you've been to the movies. You paid to go to the cinemas any time in the last 2 weeks. All right? Yes, we did. So you can sit down if. All right, very good. Sit down if you subscribe to Netflix or Stan or any... What's the other one? I couldn't remember. Fetch. Yeah, who cares? Right. Okay, all right. Still a fair few standing. Sit down if you own a PlayStation or an Xbox or one of those. I'd be sitting down right now. I'm a gamer, best of them. I play an expert. Oh, whatever. All right, sit down if you own an iPhone. Sit down if you own an iPhone. Yeah? Sit down if you own the poor cousin to the iPhone, the Samsung Galaxy. Sit down if. Look how we're losing people. Still some people standing. I'm getting nervous. Sit down if you've bought a coffee from a coffee shop in the last week or 2 weeks. Sit down if. Oh, we've still got some standing. Sit down if you own a car. In your household, there's a car. Most people are gone. I think we still have maybe one left if you own a car. Do you know that just even a car isn't interesting? What percentage of the world's population owns a car? It's incredibly small. Even that alone, beyond our normal living expenses, shows that we've got extra. Like, this is what's interesting. I think everybody's down, aren't they? I had one more if you have a mortgage or you're owning a house, or if you've ever had a garage sale, just to wipe everybody else out. And my point is, beyond basically just living indoors and feeding ourselves, everything else actually is extra. What about when it comes to rubbish? That's an interesting thing to look at, just Australian statistics about rubbish. Do you know that every year, in terms of waste, Aussies produce twice the population growth? So we are increasing our waste production every single year. Do you know the average Ipswich household generates approximately 460 kilograms of waste every single year? 460 kilograms. That equates to 34 wheelie bins. 34 wheelie bins of waste every year. And do you know, and I thought this is the interesting one, that 1 in every 5 sort of shopping bags worth of waste is food waste. It's food that you have bought, but 20% of it you're just throwing out. Saying, that 20%, that one shopping bag of 5, I'm just throwing that out. That's when it comes to waste. What about this one? How much kilograms, 6,000 kilograms of waste are destroyed or delivered to the dump every 10 minutes in Australia? 6,000 kilograms. That's enough to fill the MCG 2.5 times. That's how much waste we have. What about this one? We talked about coffee before. Do you know that Australians purchase, and this is not just how many coffees we have, but we purchase 1 billion cups of coffee. Nobody laughed at that. Didn't laugh in the first service either. 1 billion cups of coffee in paper cups per year. 1 billion. That's enough to circumnavigate the globe. If you just put them all side by side, 2.5 times around the globe. All right, so you're starting to see that at the end of the day, we have extra. This is just what Australia has, and we're starting to change maybe our perspective on extra. This is why we're talking about extra. I just want to push into it a little bit more, because the problem is we don't see that we have extra. We don't see that we have extra. We are enculturated to think differently. Here's a story from my situation. I haven't even mentioned this to Jess, but about 15 years ago, I think, we went to Hawaii. Who would think that if you travel to Hawaii, you have extra? Just anybody agree with me there? Yeah, right, of course. We're in Hawaii, right? We're at Waikiki. This is like a beautiful holiday. We're still talking about this holiday. But here's something that happened to us. We were driving along the road and we took a wrong turn. Do you remember this? We took a wrong turn and we went into this incredibly beautiful resort. And do you know what we said in that time? Why aren't we staying in this resort? When we come, remember that? When we come back to Hawaii, we must stay in this resort. It's not good enough that we're staying at that hotel in Waikiki, right? We've got to stay in this resort because why? Because our culture always tells us to see the things that we don't have, not the things that we do have. It's just the way the world works. It always exposes our heart to say, I want more. Now, I do want to make the point that some of us here today, it's not as easy for you in your situation, and I acknowledge that, but I tell you what, most of us here today are in that path of thinking, man, I want more. It's not enough what I have. And at the end of the day, this is important. It's a heart issue. When Jesus goes in at this, he's actually going into the heart. I'm telling you today, as I have researched this message, it has messed with my perspective again of my extra and what I'm supposed to do with it. We live by a different standard. Being believers, being people that are disciples, people that follow Jesus. So we're going to push into Luke 12:16. If you have a real Bible you want to open it, feel free to do that. But Jesus addresses the issue of extra, and he does it in a way only Jesus can. He talks in a parable. And if you know about the parables, it's all figurative and it's all examples. And he does it in a way that only Jesus can. So that everybody in the crowd is sort of looking around, this is a great story, and he's telling stories and he's pushing a point. And then at some point, if you've got any sense of self-awareness, the penny drops and you're thinking, he's not talking about the person next to me. He's talking about me. That story is about me. And I want you to listen to the story. You might have heard it 100 times, but listen to it. As if Jesus is telling you a story and he's trying to get something through to you here today. So Luke 12:16, and he begins in verse 15 like this. He says, a man or a woman, or a person, a man or a woman's life does not consist in the abundance of their possessions. Then you probably go, I've heard this message before. I've heard this point before. I mean, we hear it all the time. My life's not about what I own and all the stuff that I have. We say that we get this stuff, but do we really get it? And again, I'm thinking about this message, my mind went back to an article I read about a famous footballer. His name is Lucas Neal. If you are a soccer fan, I think he was probably 5 or 10 years ago, but you'd recognise this guy. A bit of a legend in the Australian team. The stats will tell you, or the stats or the truth will tell you that Lucas Neal in his career earned something like $40 million. $40 million to be one of the world's best soccer players. $40 million. Played in English Premier League. Had it all sorted. But here's the story that goes with Lucas Neal. Lucas Neal lost it all. He's bankrupt today. Apparently he got involved in horse racing, the horse racing industry and gambling. He lived a lifestyle that was incredibly outrageous. He put his money and his investments into all sorts of crazy schemes to dodge tax, and at the end of the day, Lucas Neal today has nothing. And the word in the street in the football community is what has happened to Lucas Neal, because interestingly, he's disappeared. He won't return anybody's calls. He's incredibly ashamed of himself and who he is and what he's become, and he thinks he's got no worth in that community. Now, I'm not saying that's what's the truth, but that is what that guy thinks, to the point. I was reading, a friend of his saw him in a shopping centre, and he was walking past. Lucas, must have been across the way. Lucas, hey! And Lucas saw him, and in that moment turned and just beelined away from that friend of many years and went into a store. And so ashamed that he couldn't even acknowledge the friend. Now, Lucas Neal exemplifies maybe somebody that's on 40 million. None of us probably are going to be in that realm and understanding what it means to lose that much. But I wonder how we really deal with losing everything. And for Lucas Neal, it meant nothing in this life without that stuff. I just want to read a quote which I thought was interesting from Robbie Slater, another ex-player. It says, "It's an unbelievably long list of footballers who suffer in silence when it all ends. Remove the lifestyle, the money, the adulation, the adrenaline, the crowds, the team spirit of the dressing room, and it's a huge void. Some end up with all sorts of problems, drinking, gambling, marriage breakups. I don't say it lightly, but you inadvertently end up with a form of depression." See, Lucas Neal figured his life was about the sum of his possessions. And when the stuff went away, he didn't even think he was worth talking to in a shopping centre. And Jesus is teaching in this parable we're about to enter into that we can do the same. That when we remove the gadgets and the stuff and things that we have, that we can, at the end of the day, think my life is about my possessions. And that's what we can do. We think I'm going to consume. I'm going to be about the stuff. I'm going to like food and water and all of these, but things I'm storing them up for myself. So we're going to go into this parable. It's Luke 12, and it begins in verse 16. So let's read that together. And Jesus says this, and he told them this parable: the ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. So the person is already rich. We know that. He's already wealthy. Everything's going well for him already. But then it goes even better. He gets a turn of events, and it goes really great. And then in verse 17, it says he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." He's thinking to himself, man, what do I do as a wealthy businessman? Somebody that's doing things right, everything's going perfect for me. It's going so good, I can't even store my extra. This is all the stuff that goes above and beyond. Now again, Jesus is taking things to an extreme. Maybe in your life you haven't experienced this sort of wealth, where things are going so well for you, but we're talking here about extra. And Jesus is making the point that this guy's trying to work out, what do I do with the extra that's been given to me? And then in verse 18 it says, then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns." So for him, for us today, we might be like, right, I'm going to build a new basement. I'm going to tear down my shed and make a bigger shed. I'm going to be a smart businessman, and I'm going to make room to be able to store for myself all the extra that I have, the extra grain goods that I have. It's an emergency for this guy. And he's going to keep building. I'm going to keep doing. And in verse 19, it says this, "And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." Now again, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the people listening to this, even us today. At this point, you'd go, that's a smart guy. What point is this a bad story? This guy is just He's been blessed with extra, and he's saying essentially, I'm going to save it. I'm going to just put it in barns. I'm going to look after it in a way so that in the generations to come, we'll look after it. If it happened to me, it'd be like so the next 5 generations of Musselbergs are well accounted for. And I'm telling you, in today's day and age, everybody would say, that is a good plan. But that's what I love about Jesus. He turns things upside down. And have a look at what Jesus says to him. Jesus says, but God said to him, you fool. But God said to him, you fool. And I wonder if the people of that day, and maybe even you here today, are like confused at what is going on at this moment in this parable. I mean, you fool. They were an agricultural culture. So they understood that if blessing came like that, it was God that gave the blessing. We're not too dissimilar. We sort of think, if good things are happening in my life, it's God that has brought the blessing. So I'd be confused at this point when God is saying, you're a fool for just saving that money up. You're a fool for thinking like that. What Jesus is really saying is, buddy, you are enslaved to the wealth that has come your way. You're enslaved to thinking everything that comes your way, your extra, ultimately belongs to you. Because you don't understand how you got that extra, and you don't understand that that extra is not just for your current consumption or your future consumption. You have to understand you've got to be different in the way that you think. Now, I'm not trying to make anybody angry here. But again, if you're following the way Jesus is speaking into this parable, if you think that anything that just comes your way, all that blessing, anything that comes your way is for you or for your future alone, then you're mistaken. And this is the words of Jesus here. The words of God would be, you're a fool in your heart for thinking like that. And that's got to dig down deep into our heart, because again, we're told all the time, it's all about your future. It's all about saving. This is every message we get in this world. That God thinks differently. Jesus thinks differently. And he says, you feel at this very night, your life will be demanded from you. You know what? Jesus is saying, you'll be out of money. You'll be out of time before you're out of money. And that is how it's going to be for probably 99% of people sitting in this room here today. We live in such a wealthy world, but we save up, we invest, we have our super, and if we don't, we have pension, and the government looks after us. We'll be out of time way before we're out of money. And so Jesus is making the point, at that point there, who is going to get your extra? Who's going to get your extra, buddy? And what he's saying is, I'll tell you who'll get your extra. The answer is somebody else, not because you were generous, but because you were dead. See, he didn't give it, but he left it. And in verse 21 now, Jesus pulls out of the parable. And he says this. He says, this is how it will be. What does he mean by this? He means total loss. He says, this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for themselves, or themselves or themselves, but is not rich towards God. And the implication of this verse, as you look at the life and ministry of Jesus, by the way, he's not teaching that you should never save funds. You should never be careful about your future. We know that because of the way Jesus lived his life, the people that were with Jesus. But he is making a clear point. If you think that the sum of your life, the whole purpose of your life is that when anything extra comes your way, and we've already agreed that we all have extra, when anything extra comes your way, it's for your consumption now or it's for your consumption later. If you think that, you're a fool. You are enslaved to another God. Another God has got a grip on your heart. And he says the way to break this is to be rich towards God. So how do we be rich towards God? How do we be rich towards God? He's coming hard in a point here. He says, you want to be rich towards you. You want to be rich towards yourself because of how hard you've worked, the talents, the skills, the abilities, the things that have come over your life. But he's saying, you need to be rich towards God. You need to turn it around. What in the world does that mean, to be rich towards God? Here's the thing about being rich towards God. Being rich towards God is about giving to others that are in need. Being rich towards God is seeing opportunities to take my extra and give it to somebody else who's in need in this world. And if I do that, if I give this way, then God says you're being rich towards me. How can I say that so confidently? Same passage, verse 33. Jesus says, sell your possessions and give it to the poor. Provide purses for yourself that will not wear out. Interesting. A treasure in heaven that will not be exhausted, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. Do we have to give all of our possessions? What are you saying, Jesus? Everything? No, not everything. We know this. But we sell some of our possessions. We sell some of what we have. We sell that extra stuff so that we provide a purse for ourselves that will not work out. I love God's economy. I love the way God thinks. He thinks so differently to us. We think the successful life is the great, super fun, wealth beyond measure, being able to sort it all out. I'm telling you, so many of us are going to get to the end of our life. God's going to look at us in such different lens. And I actually felt this even between services to say some of you may be approaching the end of your life thinking, man, I don't have much to show for it. I can't do the things see other people doing. I don't have that much, and God is going to look at you through a totally different lens, because he's going to say, what did you do with your extra? That's going to be the lens. Now, does that mean you never plan, you never care, you're never thinking about the future? Of course not. We've covered that ground. But Jesus is going to look differently at these things than how we look at them. So the question is, what do you do with your extra? And it all pivots around that verse 34. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Remember, we started with this a couple of weeks ago. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is a way to outwork this into our own life. So what do we do? How do we make this work for us? Well, here's the homework for this week. I want you to calculate this week. I want you to calculate. I'm getting lost in the slide. I want you to calculate this week how much you give out there into that world. How much generosity you have given in this past month, year, whatever it might be. That's about that reference point again. And have a think, how do I give? What do I give? And here's a tip. Don't just think dollars. We're really good, all of us, I think, at adding up, doing the math and saying what's in the hundreds. Pretty good. Might even make it into the thousands. It's pretty good. That's never, ever how God looks at wealth through the scriptures. God always thinks percentages. God always thinks, what proportion of your total have you given away? That's how God thinks. So I want you to look at the percentage that you give, and that's what leads us to this graphic here. Aussies give away about 1% of our income. I was shocked when I saw that. I think that's incredibly low for a nation as wealthy as we are. We give about 1%. 100, we give this much of our income away. That's how generous we are. Do you know that people of faith, we are more generous than that? We're among the top, but it's only like 1.8. People of faith, people that should live a whole different life, people that should have a whole different perspective about this world, we give 1.8% of our income away. I'm telling you, that's not good enough. That's got to challenge us. God says, if you have extra, we've all got extra, you should be excited to be looking at the opportunities that are in this world to be able to give, to be rich towards God. So I dare you to do that. Have a look at your wealth and say, how much have we given away? What have we done? Where are we at? What reference point are we at? What percentage of my income did I give outside of what I'm consuming for myself? And then I dare you to do the next step, which is this. Choose ahead of time to give a percentage of your income away. That will really challenge you. So you might say, well, we're at 2%, let's make it 5% next year. We're coming towards the end of the year. It's a great time to do some of these exercises. We're lifting that. And I'm telling you what will happen. You'll change your lifestyle to be able to fit that. You'll actually start to make some choices in advance to say, God, I am going to use the blessing that you've given me to love this world. Now, you might say, I see what's happening here, Carl. I actually am aware of the scheme that's going on here. You really want us to give that extra money to the church. That's really what's going on. Yep, that's true. You know what? Very honestly, if you're like wrestling with that, 1%, I'm going to get 2%, but I'm suspicious. Seriously, don't give it to the church. Don't give it to the church. Just start the habit of being generous. I'll tell you something, we'll be okay. And why will we be okay? Because we have a horde of people that do trust the church, that understand what our church is doing, that understand that by giving to the church, we're giving to cities overseas, we're giving to need here in this own city, we give weekly, we're giving our beyond giving. So seriously, don't give to the church, but find something of purpose. Find something that's reputable and say, I'm going to start giving. I'm going to grab a hold of that. And to me, every week now we have people that are on a journey of faith. You have some people like, I'm an atheist, but somehow I'm here in this church. I don't think it matters where you land on that spectrum. Join us in this challenge of giving. Join us in this challenge of working on what I give and say, man, I'm going to be one of the people that gives to the world. We've all heard the stats, man. If we all did this, if we all lived like we're supposed to, there would not be need in this world. So we can be among those people that live that radically different life and that give. And I'm telling you, when you're rich towards God, it changes you. I'm telling you, it changes your perspective. It says where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I'm a believer in you've got to take some faith steps in this regard. When your heart lines up, a peace comes to you that you don't understand where it comes from because your life is not driven by that same thing anymore. I'll tell you something that I wondered about not even saying, because it sort of goes against, certainly today's message, but Jess and I at the moment, we're right in the middle of investing into something outside of ourselves for our future. And you might say, well, that's exactly what you're saying not to do. No, it's not, because again, none of this is about rules. I have said that a few weeks ago. I think we're all going to be led. God, where are you leading us? What are you directing us on? And without pride, I can say, as Jess and I look at our finances, I think we're okay when it comes to giving money away. We've done the percentage thing. We've worked it out. We're on track in that regard. But maybe in this other area, we've got to tighten some things up, and we're sorting that one out. So just that to say that. But I'll say this, I had a moment, I tend to be the one that's a little bit more analytical in our home, and I had a moment, and if you're following the financial world at the moment, it's not all good. The last week, if you've got money in shares and investments like that, you will be very aware it's really dropped this week, no doubt about it. If you're watching the housing market, man, everything's doom and gloom, we're going to hit a crash. GFC might be coming, and I said to Jess, man, I had this moment, I'm like, man, what if this all goes south? What if we, lose most of it or all of it? And honestly, she just sort of looked at me, and in the way that Jess does, because she's so holy and spiritual and beautiful. You like that a little bit? But honestly, she looks at me and she just goes, Carl, it's just a line on it. It's just a piece of paper. It's just a number on a piece of paper. And you know what? That was all it took me to just dip me from, or lift me from there back to there. I'm like, spot on. You are so right. At the end of the day, we'd face it, nothing of real worth would be gone, and bang, pieces back, And so this is what I'm talking about. You grab a hold of these truths in your life, and suddenly your life is changed. The way you look at life has changed. Now, as I end, I just want to talk about the power to lean into this stuff. Where do we get that power from? How do we get the power to do this? I hope you've heard me talk along these lines before, because here's the truth. At this point, this is a great moralistic message. And it is. It was spoken by Jesus. And it packs a punch, and it's very real. But at this point, every single one of us can be like, man, okay, I've got to be more generous. That's what I've got to do. And here's the truth. You could hear this message all sorts of places. There'd be atheists that would get together and say, man, you got to give more. You might hear it at the local mosque or in any different religion. It's a common theme that you've got to give more. But this is what I love about following Jesus. What I love about Christianity is Jesus doesn't come. He didn't come to the earth and just beat us up and say, man, you've got to give more and you're all bad people and I'll see you later. So what Jesus did is he came to this earth and he lived the life that we could not live. Jesus was cast out. Jesus was discomforted. Jesus came to this world and he lived that sort of life so that we could be comforted, so that we could be satisfied in ways that far exceed where our bank balance is at, and whether our finances are going smooth, and whether we're getting the adulation that we thought we'd get. Jesus says you can live a different way because I chose to live the way that you couldn't live. I took that life so that you could live that way. And here's one just specific example. You know, you might think when it comes to giving, man, it's so hard to give, and I've given before. And that person I gave to, man, they turned their back on me. They left, they stole from me. They didn't pay back, whatever might be the situation. And Jesus says, you know what, I'll give you the power in that moment to be comforted when you're discomforted, to love when you should not be able to love. That's when I'm there for you. I'm there to give you the power to be able to live. Why? Because he took your place. That's why, you know, in the Sermon on the Mount, great sermon, challenging sermon, the standards like sky high. Jesus begins the Sermon on the Mount like this, and I've always pictured it like this. He's looking at the crowd and he says, you know, blessed are the poor in spirit. He's looking into the eyes of people. But notice he doesn't say, blessed are the poor. Again, he's not just talking about having no wealth. He's not saying this is about wealth. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit. What does he mean by that? He means there is a power that's available to you when you understand that you are poor in spirit. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? It means you stand before God and say, God, I've got nothing. God, I hear a challenge like this. Man, hits me to the heart, but I don't know how I'm going to have the effort and the strength and the power to carry that through. How do I be generous when I've got so many competing demands and I feel the pressures of this life? God, how would I do that? He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who just stand before me and say, I don't have anything to give. I don't know how I would do that. I've got nothing left. And Jesus says, bang, I'm there with you. Blessed are you that can acknowledge and come before me in humility. And bang, I'm right there with you. And that's what I believe it means to enter the kingdom of God, that his invisible kingdom, his power is there for you when you do that. And by the way, it's not just finances, it's all areas of life. The emotional issues you're going through, the addictions, the relational deal. When you say to God, I've got nothing. I have no way through this, God. I got no resource that's going to be able to make me do it. And God says, that's where I need you to be. I'm there with you. Let me come down. Let me be your strength because I've done the journey. I substituted myself for you. See, the flip side to that is sort of like a moralistic, well, God, I've done pretty well with my life. I've worked really hard. I now expect you to pay your part of the bargain, to bless me, to do the things that I want from you in my life. See, that's like a middle class in spirit. That's like a rich in spirit. And Jesus can't come down into that moment. But he calls us to be people that are poor in spirit. If we see Jesus as somebody that actually substituted himself because he flipped it upside down, he took the pain, he took the punishment, he took the death, and suddenly we live differently. This world is turned upside down. We have a power to live that we cannot believe. Suddenly we're not living by a standard that we think we have to live by. Suddenly it's not about the wealth that we have at the end of our life. It's how we've lived that life. It's a totally different world, totally different position. Suddenly we see opportunities to be generous, and I believe believers, Christians, man, we're called to be almost recklessly generous with our time and our energy and our resources, living right on that edge. And man, this is craziness. This is not what the world would tell me to do, but I'm living on that edge. Not irresponsibly generous, but recklessly generous. My opportunities to give and to bless can only come from a power that is beyond myself, not my own effort, but what you've done. You substituted yourself. And when I see where I stand in heaven, I live by a whole other level of generosity. because of who I am in him. And can I just say here today that I might have sat in this church for a long time and thought, man, there's such good people sitting around this place and they're amazing. I got nothing. I know my junk, I know my addictions, I know my problems, I know my doubts, I know my issues. Can I tell you, if Jesus was given the Sermon on the Mount, he would look directly at you. He would look directly at you, right in this moment. He would say, blessed are the poor in spirit. You will be blessed. You with nothing to give are the one I'm talking to. And so maybe here today, beyond the financial issue, is just the spiritual issue of, God, I got nothing. I can't live up. Well done. You're at that place of saying to God, God, I need you. I need that life that you lived that I couldn't live. I see what you did on the cross. I see the life that you give me. That is enough for me. I'm going to pray a prayer in a minute. Maybe you want to pray that prayer in quietness of your heart and acknowledge Jesus. And for all of us here today, let's pray that prayer of God's help in the middle of the tough challenge that he brings us about what we do with our extra. Let's pray together. Thank you, Jesus. If you want to pray this prayer in your heart, just agree in the quietness of your own heart with me. Lord Jesus, I am poor in spirit. I don't have enough. I am not good enough. I can't even conjure up enough strength to pretend. But Jesus, I see what you did. I see the cross. I see your resurrection in your life. And I believe today you're looking at me. Lord, I have faith in you. Jesus, I put my trust in you. You are enough for me. Forgive me of my sin and lift me into that newness of life and lead me, I pray. And every one of us, I pray, Jesus, would agree with that prayer. And as we get the challenge from you today about what we do with our extra, God, and the difficulty that comes with that, Lord, let it be replaced with a joy that when we look at the life of Christ, we see, Lord, a life that calls us into his strength and his power. Lord, that gives us a radical new perspective on how we can live. And God, let us be people that really are on that edge, being recklessly generous, God, with our extra, that we see that you've given it to us and we're thrilled, God, to find those opportunities to give it away in power for your grace and your power. In Jesus' name, amen. So you've seen the homework. I challenge you, have a look, think percentages and what percentage can you apply to your life. We've already said it, by the way, this morning. We gave a happy birthday to John. You guys, the second service, might not have seen that, so I'm replacing that instead of a candle. He's 60.